Hollywood has an unwritten rule. When you become one of the biggest movie stars in the world, you don't walk away. You keep making movies, you chase bigger roles, bigger paychecks, bigger awards. Because that's what success is supposed to look like. And for nearly 20 years, Cameron Diaz seemed to have it all. She went from an unknown model with no acting experience to one of Hollywood's highest paid actresses, starring in blockbuster after blockbuster alongside some of the biggest names in the industry. From the outside, it looked like the dream career, but behind the premieres, the magazine covers, and the box office success, Cameron was beginning to ask herself a question that almost nobody else could see. What if the life she'd worked so hard to build wasn't the life she actually wanted? Then, in 2014, something happened that stunned Hollywood. Without a farewell tour, without a dramatic announcement, without a scandal, Cameron Diaz quietly stepped away from the spotlight while she was still one of the industry's biggest stars. For years, people assumed they knew why. But when Cameron finally explained the real reason in her own words, it wasn't about money, it wasn't about failure, and it wasn't because Hollywood had stopped calling. It was about reclaiming something she believed success had slowly taken away. This is the story of why Cameron Diaz walked away from Hollywood at the height of her career, and why coming back years later meant doing it entirely on her own terms. If you had asked someone in the early 1990s who the next great Hollywood actress would be, Cameron Diaz probably wouldn't have been on anyone's list. She wasn't a child actor. She hadn't spent years studying at prestigious acting schools. And she wasn't working her way through small television roles, hoping for a lucky break. In fact, acting wasn't even the plan. Growing up in Long Beach, California, Cameron described herself as adventurous and independent. At just 16 years old, she signed with Elite Model Management, a decision that quickly took her far beyond Southern California. Over the next several years, she traveled the world, working in countries like Japan, Australia, and France, building a successful international modeling career long before Hollywood entered the picture. It was exciting, fast-paced, and completely different from the life she had imagined as a child. Then, almost by accident, another opportunity appeared. In 1994, Cameron auditioned for a movie called The Mask, starring one of the biggest comedy stars in the world, Jim Carrey. There was just one problem. She had almost no professional acting experience. For most aspiring actors, that would have been the end of the story. For Cameron Diaz, it was only the beginning. Against all expectations, she won the role. When The Mask was released, it became a massive commercial success, introducing audiences to a completely new face almost overnight. Instead of spending years climbing Hollywood's ladder, Cameron seemed to skip several steps entirely. One film transformed her from an international model into one of the industry's brightest new stars. Hollywood had discovered someone with natural screen presence, confidence, and undeniable charisma. But overnight success often creates its own kind of pressure. Because once you've arrived at the top so quickly, everyone expects you to stay there. And over the next 2 decades, Cameron Diaz would do exactly that, building the kind of career that most actors can only dream about. But that success came with a price that almost nobody could see. After The Mask, Cameron Diaz faced the challenge that ends many promising careers, proving that her success wasn't a fluke. Hollywood had seen plenty of models become actresses before. Some found brief success, but very few built lasting careers. Cameron knew that if she wanted to stay, she had to become more than just the new face everyone was talking about. And that's exactly what she did. Instead of repeating the same type of role, she began choosing projects that showed different sides of her talent. In 1998, There's Something About Mary became one of the biggest comedy hits of the decade. Cameron wasn't just sharing the screen with established stars anymore, she had become one herself. Just a year later, she surprised audiences again with Being John Malkovich. The critically acclaimed film proved she could do far more than romantic comedies, earning praise for taking creative risks instead of following the safest path. By the early 2000s, Cameron Diaz had become one of the few actresses who could move effortlessly between genres. She could headline action films like Charlie's Angels, bring warmth to romantic comedies like The Holiday, voice one of animation's most beloved characters as Princess Fiona in the Shrek franchise, and appear in ambitious dramas with directors like Martin Scorsese in Gangs of New York. Each success made her more valuable to Hollywood. Studios knew her name sold tickets, audiences trusted her, directors wanted to work with her, and year after year the offers kept coming. From the outside, Cameron Diaz had achieved what millions of actors spend their entire lives chasing: global fame, critical respect, financial success, and the freedom to choose almost any project she wanted. By the late 2000s, she was consistently ranked among Hollywood's highest-paid actresses, earning millions per film while remaining one of the industry's most recognizable stars. It looked like the perfect career, the kind of success people dream about. But that's exactly what makes the next chapter so difficult to understand. Because while the public saw a woman who had everything, Cameron herself was beginning to notice something completely different. The more successful her career became, the less of her own life she felt she actually owned. From the outside, Cameron Diaz was living the dream. Every new movie became another headline, another premiere, another press tour, another reminder that she was one of the most successful actresses in Hollywood. But success has a strange way of changing over time. At first, every opportunity feels like a reward. Eventually, it can start to feel like an expectation. For nearly 2 decades, Cameron's life followed the same relentless cycle. Months on a film set, then weeks traveling the world promoting that movie. Television interviews, magazine covers, photo shoots, award shows. Before long, another script would arrive and the process would begin all over again. To millions of people watching from the outside, it looked glamorous. To Cameron, it gradually became something else. Years after stepping away, she finally explained what that life had actually felt like. Speaking with Gwyneth Paltrow in 2020, Cameron said that when you're making movies at that level, they own you. She explained that filming could consume months at a time, leaving very little space for anything outside the production. Looking back, she realized she had spent years giving almost every part of herself to her career. It wasn't one bad experience. It wasn't one difficult movie. It was the accumulation of 20 years. In another interview with Kevin Hart, she reflected on something even more personal. She said there were so many parts of my life that I wasn't touching. She talked about not managing her own daily life, describing the feeling of becoming Cameron Diaz the machine, instead of simply Cameron Diaz as a person. That distinction changes everything, because this wasn't the story of an actress who stopped loving movies. It was the story of someone who realized she no longer recognized the balance in her own life. The career that had given her worldwide fame had quietly taken ownership of her time, her routine, and in many ways, her ability to decide how she wanted to live. Then something happened that forced her to ask a question she'd never seriously considered before. What if success wasn't supposed to feel like this? For most people, walking away from a dream sounds like failure. For Cameron Diaz, it was beginning to look like freedom. And once that idea took hold, there was no easy way to ignore it. Because the next decision she made wouldn't just change her career. It would redefine what success meant for the rest of her life. By 2014, Cameron Diaz had reached a place that most actors never do. She had spent 2 decades at the top of Hollywood. She could choose her projects. She was financially secure. And there was no shortage of studios willing to work with her. If she'd wanted to keep making movies for another 10 years, she almost certainly could have. Instead, after filming Annie, she quietly stepped away. No farewell tour, no dramatic press conference, no announcement that this was the end. She simply stopped. At the time, many people assumed it was temporary. Others believed she was just taking a break. But as the years passed, it became clear that this wasn't a pause. It was a decision. The question was, why? For years, the public filled that silence with its own theories. Maybe she was tired of Hollywood. Maybe she couldn't find the right roles. Maybe she'd lost interest in acting, but when Cameron finally began talking openly about her decision, her explanation was both simpler and far more personal. She didn't say Hollywood had failed her. She said she wanted to live her life differently. IrishTimes.com. That phrase appears again and again in her interviews. Not escape, not retire, not quit. She wanted a different life. Shortly after stepping away from acting, Cameron married musician Benji Madden. Over the following years, they built a family together, eventually welcoming children and creating a private life that was largely removed from the constant attention of Hollywood. IrishTimes.com. Looking back, she explained that this was exactly what she had hoped for. She had spent most of her adult life living according to production schedules. Now she wanted to live according to her own. But stepping away from movies didn't mean stepping away from work. Instead, she redirected her energy. She wrote books focused on health, aging, and long-term wellness. She co-founded Avaline, an organic wine company, becoming deeply involved in building a business outside the film industry. These weren't side projects, they reflected a different definition of success. One built around intention instead of constant visibility. Years later, speaking at the Fortune Most Powerful Women Summit, Cameron said nothing, not fame, not success, and not anyone else's opinion, could have changed her mind about leaving when she did, because she needed to build the life she truly wanted. W.com. For the first time in decades, she wasn't asking what Hollywood wanted from her. She was asking what she wanted from her own life. And according to Cameron, she found it. Which makes what happened next even more surprising. Because after nearly 10 years away, the actress who seemed completely at peace decided to come back. For nearly 10 years, Cameron Diaz never completely closed the door on acting. She simply stopped opening it. Scripts continued to arrive. Offers continued to come. But one after another, she turned them down. Not because she couldn't return, but because the life she had built had become more important than the career she had left behind. Then something changed. It wasn't a desperate search for another hit movie. It wasn't a comeback designed to recapture old fame. It was one opportunity that felt different from all the others. That opportunity was back in action, and one person played a bigger role than anyone else in bringing Cameron Diaz back to the screen. Jamie Foxx. The two weren't strangers. They had first worked together in Any Given Sunday in 1999. Years later, they reunited for Annie in 2014, the last film Cameron made before stepping away from Hollywood. Now, nearly a decade later, it was Jamie Foxx asking her to come back again. According to Cameron, that relationship mattered more than people realized. In interviews promoting Back in Action, she explained that after 10 years away, the biggest question wasn't whether she still knew how to act. It was who she would trust enough to spend months working beside every day. She said she already knew exactly what kind of professional Jamie Foxx was. She knew what to expect. And after such a long break, that certainty made all the difference. Speaking on The Graham Norton Show, Cameron put it even more directly. She said she had spent 10 years ignoring offers, but when this script arrived, she felt the timing was finally right. If she was going to spend long days away from her family, she wanted to do it with someone she considered the most talented man in the entertainment business. But there was another reason the timing mattered. The Cameron Diaz returning to Hollywood wasn't the same woman who had left it. She wasn't trying to rebuild a career, she wasn't chasing bigger paychecks, and she wasn't looking for validation. She had already found what she had been searching for: a family, a quieter life, a sense of balance. That meant acting was no longer the center of her identity. It had become a choice. In fact, Cameron has been careful not to promise that she's back for good. After Back in Action, she said she still reserves the right to accept another movie or never make one again, depending on what makes sense for her and her family. That may be the biggest difference between the actress who walked away in 2014 and the woman who returned years later. Before, Hollywood shaped her schedule. Now, her life shapes her career. She didn't return because she needed Hollywood. She returned because, for the first time, Hollywood fit into the life she had chosen. And perhaps that's the real ending to the story. Not that Cameron Diaz came back, but that she finally reached a place where coming back, or walking away again, was entirely her decision. At first, Cameron Diaz's story looks like one of Hollywood's most surprising retirements. But after looking at the evidence and listening to her own words, it becomes something very different. She didn't walk away because her career was failing. She didn't leave because Hollywood stopped believing in her. And she didn't disappear because she no longer loved acting. She walked away because, after spending more than 20 years chasing one version of success, she realized there was another version she had never given herself the chance to experience. In interview after interview, Cameron has returned to the same idea. She wanted to reclaim her life, to build a family, to make her own decisions, to stop measuring success by how many films she made and start measuring it by how she actually felt living her life. That's what makes her story so unusual. Hollywood is built on momentum. The industry teaches actors to keep going while they're successful, to say yes to the next movie, the next opportunity, the next spotlight. Cameron Diaz chose something much harder. She chose to stop, not because she had to, but because she believed she finally had enough. And perhaps that's why her return nearly a decade later didn't feel like a comeback. Comebacks usually happen because someone wants to get back what they lost. Cameron Diaz never believed she had lost anything. In many ways, she believed she had found it. Today, she still acts only when it fits the life she's built, not the other way around. That simple reversal may be the biggest transformation of her entire career. Hollywood no longer defines her success. She defines it herself. Maybe that's the real lesson hidden inside Cameron Diaz's journey. Success isn't just about reaching the top. It's about having the freedom to decide whether staying there is still worth it. And for Cameron Diaz, walking away wasn't the end of her story. It was the moment she finally became the author of it.